Thanks, Nazir. You have a lot of work to do. The next speaker is Kim Robin Stoller. He is co-director of the International Institute for Education and Research on Anti-Semitism, and since September 2009, a board member of the research network Ethnic Relations, Racism and Anti-Semitism of the European Sociology Association. Kim co-organized several conferences on combating anti-Semitism and Holocaust education and taught in Humboldt University. Kim is a visiting fellow of the Cantor Center, working on a PhD dissertation on initiatives to combat anti-Semitism in Morocco. Kim will be speaking of Holocaust education projects inside and outside Europe. Kim, please.
So, hello? Okay. I prepared a PowerPoint presentation, so my talk will be slightly different than the talk before, which I think later for discussion might be more interesting to hear the, things from the both other speakers. But and we changed a little bit the schedule. I will speak before Abdallah because yeah, we just coordinated before this talk and to make sure that there are not too many repetitions. And now I just have to figure out. Okay, it should work. And F5.
You want us to turn off the lights?
Maybe a little bit. Yeah. This one?
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay?
Yeah.
So at the beginning, I want to thank especially SD Webman for organizing, putting together this very important event, and also to Dina Porat from the Cantor Center, where I now have the possibility to be a fellow for a couple of months. And also for Ronit, who was co-organizing and co-coordinating everything which is taking place at the Cantor Center, and also to you all to attend this talk. So what I'm going to talk about is a little bit Holocaust education projects inside and outside Europe, approaches and experiences. On the one hand, I will refer to several projects which take place and took place in Europe. And on the other hand, on the experience we had in Morocco, I'm talking even if I'm from Berlin, I've been involved in a series of projects in Morocco since, let's say, 2006, something like this, and a lot of projects, Abdallah and me, we did together. So I speak also about some projects just Abdallah has been involved without me. So, and it will serve as a kind of introduction for Abdallah too, and he will talk a little bit more on concrete developments here in the region and here in Morocco especially. Okay, so I want to focus on three things. On the first thing is a little bit the differences if we are talking about Holocaust education inside Europe among Muslims and Arab population, and on Holocaust education projects in Islamic Arabic countries, where I will refer especially on Morocco. The second point I want to focus on are those initiatives in Europe which are taking place. And the third point will be focus on Moroccan civil society activities and also European states-backed initiatives in Morocco. And of the Aladin project, we already heard a bit from Esti's talk, so I will shorten it a bit when I'm speaking about it. So, okay. If we are referring to European Union, it's estimated that in the European Union there live about between 15 million and 25 million of Muslims. Most of them in countries like Germany with a Turkish background, France with a Maghrebian background, the UK with a Southeast Asian background, and also larger communities are in the Netherlands and Spain and Italy. So what in Europe, or especially in the European Union, is important if we're referring to Holocaust education, is on the one hand, Europe is the place where the Holocaust took place. So all the memory of Europe is slightly, of course, different than other Muslim and Arab countries. That's one important thing. But what is also important is that the memory of the Holocaust is part of the public discourse in Europe and is acknowledged by the elite, by the media, and it's different, and it's important if you're talking about such initiatives. So the second point is in Europe they take Holocaust commemoration events place where most of the time also Muslim organizations are invited, and it's different as how far they participate or not. For example, in the UK, there were a long time, and still is going on, a refusal to take part in the state commemoration events by the Muslim community or the different Muslim communities. The second point, or the third point I want to focus on, is the acknowledgement by the population that the Holocaust took place. This is important, and even if there's a kind of rejection of Holocaust commemoration, and polls or surveys can show that about 40 to 50% have a kind of rejection or anti-Semitic remarks on Holocaust commemoration and memory in Europe. In general, it's at least the Holocaust as a fact is acknowledged. Holocaust education, which is also very important, is part of the school curriculum, where most of the Muslim youth also go to. Holocaust denial is in many European countries persecuted, and Holocaust denial is an anti-hegemonic discourse. That's very important if we refer to initiatives in Europe compared to other Arabic or Islamic countries. And it's mostly not in danger for civil society to talk about the Holocaust and to speak about it, to educate about it, which is also very important. There are no legal problems to educate on the Holocaust, and often in many countries such initiatives are acknowledged by the state or financially supported. So, okay, something doesn't work here probably. Okay, Morocco as an example, the public discourse is totally different. So Holocaust denial is on the one hand not persecuted, on the other hand is widespread as a rumor, and anti-Semitism and calls for destruction of Israel form part of a public discourse. And also kind of part of an identity construction of an Arabic and Islamic identity. It's not all of them, of course, but it's an important discourse also in Moroccan, which is in the Arab Muslim world exception. Exception in the sense that much more projects in a good direction take place in Morocco compared to other countries. So most of the political movements in Morocco, like the Islamist movements, the left pan-Arabist movement, and the Arab nationalist movement, see projects dealing with the Holocaust as a strategy for normalization with Israel, and therefore reject it. So it's a huge problem with which we are confronted there, and Abdallah later on, I'm sure, will refer also to some different movements, like Berber cultural movement there, and why it might be easier for them to talk about the Holocaust and so on. For civil society, I'm not talking about state projects in Morocco, it's difficult and dangerous to educate on the Holocaust. The hegemony, like the discourse hegemony, is rejecting to talk about the Holocaust. in some points when initiatives to combat anti-Semitism took place, or people wanted to talk about the Holocaust and had projects there, they were confronted with violent attacks. There's the fear of terror against from Islamist terrorist groups against some people being active in this field, and so on. On the other hand, it's also an authorization is needed. If you want to do there's something, the state have to approve that you give a public talk on the Holocaust. So it's also a question how the state acts and different over time. And there was also a change in the last years about this. Financial assistance, of course, for those projects are really difficult, and it would be very helpful if there's some kind of international political support on initiatives dealing with the Holocaust. So, okay. I'm sorry, I have my Mac and couldn't connect it here, so I'm a little bit confronted with this other computer. So now I want to give some examples what happened and which kind of activities took place in Morocco from the civil society. I'm not talking, I afterwards will refer on state-backed initiatives from European countries, like Aladin project, which has at least the backing of kind of UNESCO and also from the French Foreign Ministry. So it's a different kind if initiatives in Morocco start at some point because there's no financial thing and there's no security backing for those initiatives, as like if Netherlands, the Anne Frank House getting active there, or the Aladin project, or the UK, or whatever. So in 2008, in January 2008, 2 kids went to a Holocaust commemoration event to Yad Vashem from Morocco, and this was made public, and they were really hardly attacked afterwards in the not physically, but in the media discourse. It was perceived as a intense for normalization and so on. There were demonstrations in front of this kid's school. The parents were paid to reject that the kids wanted to go there and stuff like this. It was really, for those kids and also for everybody else involved there, it was really a hard time. As an answer of these anti-Semitic attacks against the visit of a Yad Vashem Holocaust commemoration event, the Berber Jewish Friendship Organization, Momoa Collective, was founded, led by Mohamed Moha, who afterwards also took part in a lot of initiatives. And this, I think, this initiative was really a very important starting point in Morocco to confront anti-Semitism and also talk about the Holocaust. Because on the one hand, Mohamed Moha before was an activist in the Pan-Arab left movement, so he criticized publicly and in his organization and also the whole left in Morocco that sometimes they referred that they would argue as the Nazi did, like claiming for the destruction of Israel and fight against the Jews and so on. And on the other hand, the term anti-Semitism appeared in the Moroccan public as a reference. It was unknown before, and now the term l'antisemitism is known in the Moroccan public and has been referred afterwards. Okay, 5 minutes are left. Then what happened in 2009 was there was a kind of coordination meeting or conference between different organizations over all Morocco to set up a kind of network to confront anti-Semitism. It's more informal, it wasn't legalized and so on, but it was a really important starting point where a lot of other initiatives followed. One of those initiatives was a visit to Yad Vashem of 18 Berber Moroccans in 2009, November 2009, which also had a lot of public attention in Morocco. It was hardly attacked by most of the other dominating political movements and the press. What also followed there was the Yad Vashem visit. Of course, Abdallah bin Hassi was also involved in a seminar in 2011, a seminar at the Memorial de la Shoah in Paris, and also a visit to Auschwitz from there of a group of Moroccan educators and activists. And following, or in the same year, and also in the last year, in January, there were commemoration events organized by Abdallah bin Hassi in Morocco. And the last year, in April 2012, we had a conference in Berlin, co-organized also by the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, together with Abdallah and Mohamed Mohar and others, to discuss how to teach about the Holocaust in Morocco and how to confront anti-Semitism there. So these were some of those civil society projects where we were in the last years somehow involved. Abdallah will refer to them a little bit more, I assume. And now I want just to turn back briefly on Europe to show what kind of projects took place in Europe over the last years regarding the topic Holocaust education among Muslims and Arabs. So as the time runs out, I try to keep it short. I think there's just some mistake in the slides. Okay, so on the one hand, on a state level, it's important what I already mentioned. It's the Holocaust commemoration events where Muslim organizations are also invited. It's to a certain point, sometimes took place, either rejected. There were debates on it, especially in the United Kingdom. Muslim organization also got a lot of pressure to take part, or at least not boycott them. What is important, I think, is the school education system, because every kid in most of European countries at some point is confronted with the Holocaust. There is education on the Holocaust is existent for all kids in most of the European countries. But in the last years, especially since 9/11, there were reports on problems in teaching the Holocaust in schools. So there were a lot of debates in different countries. The International Task Force for Holocaust Education, Research and Remembrance discussed these issues. And a lot of countries and the state institution try to develop new strategies to deal with it. On the one hand, like the Holocaust Educational Trust in the UK organized in the last years that several 100,000 of school pupils could go to a visit to Auschwitz, and like the Anne Frank House, the Anne Frank House in Amsterdam introduced some special material to deal with Holocaust education in multicultural society. And what most of the projects, like educational projects, try to do is to make some reference and to revise the older Holocaust educational material in the sense that Muslim people or people with a Muslim, Arabic, Turkish background can also identify somehow with the Holocaust. It means, for example, in the German case, that attempts exist. For example, the House of the Wannsee Conference shows in your have materials where they also show like Jewish victims from Turkey and how the Turkish state reacted and how they helped some Jews and how ambassadors helped some Jews in France and so on. So one important attempt is not to have it just a national narrative which excludes like the Muslim, Arab, Turkish population, more than include them in new pedagogical approaches. As the time runs out, I just finish here, and maybe I can later add some other projects. Okay, thank you.